Okay, so I'm super pleased, as always, to have Claire with me, the secular Quranist. That means she's agnostic, but likes the laws of the Quran. As she says, Sharia for the West. Is that right? Have I summarized you correctly in
Yes,
some way?
yes, yes. I do think that we all need a list of rules that we at least know about, even if we do not completely agree with, so we know what the rules are supposed to be, and will notice when our ruling classes go against them.
Yeah, we're feeling the ruling classes more and more nowadays. There's a billionaire class and everything, so that's a interesting thing to talk about at some point. But yep. So I'm a Muslim, and I invite people from different backgrounds, people who don't like Islam as well, to talk about practical solutions to the West's problems. And I say white people's problems. It sounds really racist, but I'm trying to be really precise. And white men, even. Um, and you might say, "What about women?" But there's different ways of explaining it. But um, because I think that there are many different cultures, and I need to be precise. And the kind of problems where white people are suffering from, in short, is lack of purpose, population implosion. Self-hate is what we're going to be talking about today as well, which is a massive problem because suicide is rapidly rising in the West. So let's play this and see what you think from this very well-known podcaster, what he's got to say.
What's the biggest irrational fear that you have besides being unsuccessful? I guess not being enough. I don't know who for, but just that energy, that insufficient, unwanted, the sense that you always need to prove yourself, you always need to sort of offer the world something in order for it to love you back. The fear of not being enough has behind the scenes driven an awful lot of what I've done, and I think it's very common for a lot of people. The fear of abandonment, sense of always sort of being on the outside, this like irrational fear, this sense that someone's mad at me and I don't know why. I'm very familiar with. And the weird thing is that it is potent fuel to drive you to go and do some pretty magnificent things, but it's toxic if you use it for too long. So I'm working hard at trying to switch from diesel to electric. What's the biggest irrational?
Okay, I like to give a really short answer. I've already posted essentially what I think is happening. Um, Everybody's got a conscience. You call it soul, and in Islam, we've got different stages of development of the soul because as you grow, your soul grows. And short answer is the Quran says we have a thing called a self-accusing soul, essentially that describes the conscience, just tells you when you're doing something wrong or right. And it can develop to a soul at peace, which is what we're trying to do. You're trying to find peace, but you've got to obey some natural laws, is all I'm going to say for now. And we're not necessarily meeting those things. We are not becoming our best selves, and we might think we're becoming our best selves, but there's a better self that is more giving, more at one with God. That's what I'll say for now. That's a long answer. So anyway, what are your initial thoughts, Claire? Why do you think, despite being incredibly successful, this guy, I don't know if you know him, Williamson, but he's one of the most successful, at least British podcasters on YouTube, and yet he doesn't feel enough, and he's got this strange feeling of something's angry with him, as he says at some point. So
It's like irrational fear, this sense that someone's mad at me and I don't
and he
know
doesn't know
why.
why. Fascinating. And just to add, like the idea of the conscience is known by psychologists, accepted by psychologists, to the extent that people like Viktor Frankl say, just listen to your conscience and you'll be happy. So that's fascinating. Anyway, so Claire, what do you think? What's happening?
Do you know if he's an atheist or
Yeah, he's basically an atheist. By listening to his material, he doesn't say it exactly, but it seems to be pretty clear to me. He never says he believes in God or has faith or something. Yeah. So I would say he's an atheist. Yeah.
So I suppose atheists would know that they are mortal and fallible, and whatever success they enjoy could be instantly taken away for all kinds of reasons, accidents, the malice of others, or some disaster. So I guess any rational, self-aware person would know that, and that is what he fears.
So he's fearing like looming disasters around every corner, sort of thing. Is that what you're saying?
I believe so.
Yeah, that makes sense. And believing in God protects you. At least the Islamic idea of God is that there are no accidents, everything's under God's control, and everything is for your benefit. So Muslims are told, I think we talked about Judaism has something similar, like everything is for your benefit. Like if you have a difficulty, it's not just random, it's like, oh, you could learn something. So there are no looming disasters, they're all benefits in different ways, or benefits in disguise, sometimes obvious, like, oh, something good happens, something difficult happens, but that's life, right? You can't have it all easy, otherwise you're not learning anything. But that's the kind of, it does, all I'm saying is it really does help to believe that there's a plan and God's got the plan, and it's not all random and terrible things are not looming around the corner. I guess so. I mean, I guess I do believe that, but yeah. So go on.
Well, I was just saying that you would have to get yourself into a state of submission and acceptance, that you will accept whatever fate gives you because you believe it will be ultimately good for you, which I don't think atheists do, because they'll be blaming somebody, if something goes wrong, suing somebody,
Yeah, he does believe in, I think, taking responsibility from what I can tell, because there's a lot of that going around YouTube. It's all about, accepting responsibility, doing the best you can with whatever you've got, sort of thing. So I don't think he's a blamer kind of guy. Let me ask you, what do you think this is, this sense of somebody's mad at me? Because that really sounds like this verse of the Quran I've got on the screen, essentially your soul. And I don't think that's a new idea, that your soul tells you off when you're doing something wrong and rewards you when you're doing something right. I mean, what do you think it is, this feeling? He's not an insane person just with voices in his head. So what do you think this feeling is, that somebody's mad at me, he says, and he doesn't know why?
Well, he may be feeling disasters around the corner, and maybe he suffers from depression. This kind of general sense of anxiety that some people feel. They can't quite explain it. And I think sometimes it's classified as a mental illness, isn't it? When you feel a sense of impending doom.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a description of depression, I guess, because it's like you're constantly feeling something terrible is going to happen. So that's interesting. Mike, do share your opinions. What do you think? I kind of wanted Mike the atheist on this, but I like to just go with whatever my plan is. He'll be joining us next week, Mike here. It'll be interesting what you've got to say as well.
Perhaps he'll be more interesting.
No, you definitely won't be in. I'm a very much kind of go with the flow, and the flow is like, I told you about it, let's go with it. But actually, it's not that there's different kinds of answers people give, right? I wanted to ask.
He seems to have something to say about it.
Who? He's just got
Mike.
clear as hair. That's all he's got to say so far. Clear as hair.
Oh,
that's
right.
what he said. Yeah. So so he appreciates you being here, it seems. So but you're not a believer in God, so there's definitely an interesting conversation to have here. Like, you're an agnostic. But I think like, if there's water somewhere and you go, I'm not sure there's water, that doesn't really help you get the water. You need some sort of conviction, don't you think? So I'm interested, do you feel you suffer anything that atheists suffer from, the lack of kind of knowing that there's definitely a plan? Like, there's no there can't be a conviction, can there be, of a God if you're agnostic?
No, but I think I am theologically aware of what theists are supposed to believe in. So I know the theory. Nobody knows anything for certain, but well, I can switch between two frames of mind. So I think I can reap the benefits of those who believe, because I know what they're supposed to believe.
Okay, because even as a Muslim and a believer in God, it's not just black and white. In the Quran, I think there's like 13 different levels of awareness of God. Like, there's the kind of what you sound like you're talking about. I think it's 13 or 11 different levels of awareness of God, which you can demonstrate through sort of practical things like how much you're willing to sacrifice. And the most basic level, I guess, I think, was just saying you believe in God. And then there's a sort of academic level, which kind of you're saying. But there's a higher level, which essentially is like feeling it in your bones and having practical experience of God, right? And I've believed in God for a lot. I mean, I've had a stage when I was an atheist, whatever, but it hasn't been just like, oh, I believe in God, therefore I'm totally at peace. It's taken, and it's a continuous process actually, of seeing more signs of God, going with the flow, that, oh, it's, like, things happening, and me kind of accepting that there is a plan, and then I kind of see the plan again and again. Do you know what I mean? Like, you keep getting more and more evidence. So I don't think there's any comparison between a person like yourself. I'm trying to, me, I'm always going to give you a bit of a hard time just for teasing out a good conversation. I don't think there's any comparison between a person who has a lot of conviction and experience of God compared to somebody who's like, maybe there's a God. I don't think there's any comparison. Conviction is a really important thing, and I can't believe you can have conviction of God's plan if you're not even sure God exists.
Well, I don't see what the problem is. You entertain the idea that God might exist and might support you and assist you if he approves of what you're doing. What's the problem? I mean, this is how
the
I
problem is the level of conviction, and I think you need a level of conviction because life can be very difficult. That's what I'm saying. How can you have conviction if you're not sure God exists? How can you have conviction of God's plan and taking care of everything if you're not sure if God exists in the first place? That's what I'm confused about. Do you get that? It must be, makes sense. That's the question.
I think a lot of Muslims, or I think a lot of people who call themselves believers don't really believe. They just know that in order to, be with a member of their powerful religious group, they have to say they believe, or they won't get the benefits of membership.
Okay, sure. There's the community benefit, but then there's the psychological benefits. Like, if you don't really believe in it, you cannot reap the benefits of believing in God. Like, do you know what I mean? You can't just
that's what I say to people. Like obviously, if you really do believe, then you're more likely to obey, and and to get your people to obey for longer from generation to generation, and that would be the benefits of believing. I mean, yes, you can, not believe but still obey, But I think once you start obeying and once you start feeling the benefits of obedience, then you will want to believe, and then the belief will naturally come.
Interesting. The belief would naturally come from just following it.
From practice, because just entertaining the idea, like, well, God might exist and God might help me, is I think that's how people think anyway, because, well, nobody is sure that God exists. They can just be told, like, well, we're Muslim and we believe in this, and we're Jewish and we believe in that.
I think the beliefs is far deeper than that for many people, but in terms of actual personal experience, and it's not just a club that they belong to or something. But I do agree that by practicing, God says that if you take one step towards me, I will take 10 steps towards you. Basically, you make an effort and I will demonstrate myself to you. God will demonstrate God rewards people make an effort. That's one of his qualities in Islam.
Well, yes. So if people entertain the idea that God might exist, I mean, it's just because they're always wanting stuff, right? So what will happen is that they will. They'll be asking God for stuff, and then they'll be thinking, "Do I deserve it or don't I?" Or so they would have all these internal conversations, and this means that they will be kind of talking to God, like, oh God, well, I deserve this because I've been a good boy or a good girl, or I know I've not been particularly good of late, but I will be. So, and if I am good, will you give this thing that I want to me? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So people pray, and then the result is hopefully they get a result. But sometimes not always that straightforward. Sometimes they pray for stupid stuff or something that's not for their benefit. But anyway, okay. So you're saying, practice it and you get some results. Have you tried it yourself? Like, have you tried, asking God for stuff? And have you got any experience of God? Not really. It's okay.
No. Obviously I haven't had visions, but
I haven't had
in a
visions,
way,
but I
all
just
you
had
have to
like
do is
continuous.
entertain the idea and and understand the nature of the bargain. So basically he's saying obedience will get you eternal life in heaven. So anybody understands the bargain, and those who wish to believe in it will want to believe in it, and then they will start behaving as if it were true, because that's what people do. I mean, lots of people just make up stories and then just believe in them.
Oh my God, that's not what I do.
They do.
I don't think I know. I don't
I
think
talk
I
to them the
believe
whole
in some
time.
random. I don't think I believe in random stories, and then because I've been pretending to believe it, and then eventually I believe it. It's not a fake it till you make it sort of thing. I don't think. I think it's anyway. But anyway, because that's what it sounds like you're saying. Is you can just religions are these crazy random stories, and if you believe it hard enough, you start just believing and accepting it. Is that what you're saying? Just to clarify.
Well, yes. I
Oh
mean,
my
this is
God.
how most
Okay.
people operate. They like a story, and then they behave as if it's true. I mean,
I mean,
children start doing that until they're told, what you believe, magic and fairies and rubbish like that. It can't possibly be true, right? But there are many adults who basically do that. I talk to them the whole time.
sure.
Particularly
There
people
must be
with
yeah.
Jewish conspiracy theories. It's like they make up some story that Jews did this and that, and it's their stupid religion.
Okay, cool. So I want to explore different parts of it. So you've explained that, you might think, religion might be some stupid story, but it's got its practical use because you certainly support this, the theology, at least, or the rules of Islam. So something interesting going on there, but we can't explore all of that right now. So I want to poke at like different elements of this. So let's think about the soul. What do you think about the soul? Like Viktor Frankl, and even I think what's the most famous one? Freud, psychologist. They accept the existence of a soul, and from what I've read, it's kind of like an almost independent entity, which is, I think, a common understanding of the soul. Like if you do something bad, you can't trick the soul into saying, "Oh, it's okay," or the conscience, I should say. It's kind of independent. If you mess up, do something wrong, it will tell you off. Much like I think what Williamson is saying. So, I mean, what do you think? What's your thoughts about the conscience, the soul? I think they're one and the same sort of thing. Do you think that's troubling him, Williamson, in this scenario? Because I want to dig into this sort of self-hate thing. And one kind of aspect could be that people are not listening to their souls. That's why they hate themselves. So they deserve to hate themselves, and therefore, but they can also fix that. That's the good news if you know that you're doing something wrong. So that's a bit of a long question. So soul, conscience, self-hating, what do you think's going on there? Is there any link between those things?
Why do people hate themselves? Because I think it's cognitive dissonance, right? They know something and they
No,
see
but I
the
just want
world.
to check. What's your opinion of? I want to ask, like, delve into different aspects. Do you know what I mean? So I just want to ask you, what's your opinion on the conscience?
We all have the idea that we're supposed to obey certain rules. So if we don't obey them, we will have a conscience about that. So, I mean, if the law is that you have to drive at 30 miles an hour and you're driving 50 miles an hour, well, you're going to feel not very comfortable because you think you might get a ticket.
Cool.
A camera might flash, and you'll get a ticket in the post.
Sure, but there might be certain laws or things that nobody can see, and it might not be against the law, and your conscience is still telling you don't do it or something. Being rude to somebody, being rude to your mum, for example. Nobody's going to put you in prison for it, but you might feel bad about it. I think a lot of people probably feel bad about it. I don't know, unless they've got a really bad relationship. So that's to do you think there is a thing called a conscience that tells you off when you do something bad, even if it's not against the law? The bad thing is not against the law. What do you think? Is there such a thing?
Yeah, because we sort of know we're not supposed to be rude to mum or our spouse or shout at our children, whatever it is. So when we find ourselves losing our temper and saying mean things, we would have a conscience about it. But obviously, different people have different sensitivities about their conscience. Some people can break the law the whole time and not turn a hair. And some people, feel bad about little things.
I think on the surface, people. I think on the surface, people pretend not to care, but you get so many signs. I don't know, but I think people do hide it for a while, and then it comes out. Like if you don't deal with your conscience and listen to it for a long time, you suffer big time off if you leave it for a long time. But I think that's true for any disease, I guess. That's my feeling. I don't think people are immune to it.
Yeah, they start feeling bad because if they start lying to themselves and tell people I believe this, and they know deep down they don't, then they'll feel uncomfortable. It's called cognitive dissonance, isn't it?
So cognitive dissonance, what I understand, is some sort of confusion. Like I forgot. Can you describe what that means?
You're told something, and then you notice that it's not what you're told.
Yeah. Okay.
That's how I understand it.
Yeah, I find the word confusing. I remember anyway. Okay. So go on. You're saying something about besides where are you going to make a different point to the one where you were saying that if you're an atheist, you don't think there's a plan where God is leading the way and everything is for your benefit. Therefore, everything is random. Therefore, anything could go wrong and you could lose everything at any moment. That was one thing. Were you going to make another argument besides
Well,
that?
I was going to make a point about, anti-Semites who love to blame Jews for every single bloody thing. And they direct their mental energy towards, whatever it is, we're going to blame Jews, right? So I think eventually they'll start blaming the Jews for the Big Bang, because you were
I
talking
thought it's the
earlier.
Muslims that get blamed for everything, no?
It depends on who you want to blame. I mean, you choose a particular target, but I mean, if you believe in God, you're supposed to attribute all good and evil from him. And but I know that some Muslims who have trouble with that because they can't believe in their childlike way. Why would God be so evil and make horrible things happen? And I say, look, if you believe in the whole story that is God, this life is an examination hall to test your ability to know the difference between good and evil in theory and in practice. And therefore, it is necessary for both good and evil to exist. So you know how to choose from, which to choose from.
Sure.
Which is simple enough, but, it's like that they still refuse to believe in it. I just don't know how more simple I can make it. But there are loads of people, they just want to blame every single bloody thing on Jews. And it's sort of like, oh, but, here's a liberal Jew, but they don't concentrate on liberalism because liberalism is their, Gentile thing, and so that their story is that Jews destroyed liberalism, and if they're Christians, and they'll say Jews destroyed Christianity, like Jews
I don't
destroyed,
really. Yeah. Okay.
You,
I mean, I
you
didn't
don't
hear it
really
too
agree,
much.
or you don't understand, or what?
I just, I mean, like, it just sounds like you're putting a lot of focus on Jew blaming. A lot of Muslims are happy with Jews; they just don't like Zionism, and that's a very different thing. And they're not proper. That if we're not talking about, then you're no longer talking about Judaism, which is what we're talking about. We're talking about Jews, the race. And I don't think Muslims generally hate Muslims. I mean, if you go to Speaker's Corner,
I mean, some people
essentially
think you
taken
have
over.
to hate Jews.
Sorry?
Some people think you have to hate Jews to be Muslim.
Oh yeah, but there's always some extreme minority. But if you go to Speaker's Corner, which you know very well, it's full of Muslims, and the Jews, dressing, as Jews, and no problems unless they start saying killing babies is fine in Gaza. Do you know what I mean? But generally, Jews are good friends with the Muslims there because there's an understanding. They have a very similar religion, and they've always been together. Muslims have protected Jews for centuries, and Muslims kind of know that. There's only like the really, really uneducated few that believe what you're saying, I think. Yeah.
Well,
So
I
yeah.
guess because I talk to them so much, I mean, this is what they do, and you see, I think it's become a kind of religion for them. All religions have belief systems, that they have values, and their value would be to blame Jews for every single thing.
Sure. Okay, but let's move on off the Jew thing because it's not really the main topic, right? So I'm trying to explore different things that especially atheists suffer from, but we don't even have to make it just atheists because I generally feel that the rise of atheism, there's a correlation, more atheism, less happiness. There's even studies like the decline in church attendance has increased, as correlated with depression, which is not surprising because there's nowhere to congregate outside, materialistic places like shopping malls and shopping centers, whatever you want to call them. And society's become very isolated, individualistic, competitive. There's so many terrible things that make an atheistic society so cold and miserable and depressing and quite frankly suicidal. So let me ask you a question. Do you think, I'm trying to explore different elements of why he might be so depressed, sounding like he's depressed, despite being incredibly successful. And I want to focus on this sort of individualism of atheism, because when you believe in God and God tells you you're all brothers and sisters, most religions do. So I'm over, in a Muslim country, we're expected to walk past anybody, you say hello or assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, just like the Jews do, by the way, and the Christians used to, which means peace be upon you, and you call them my brother, my sister, and all this kind of stuff, right? But when you become an atheist, that's a weird thing to do. In England, that's a weird thing to do, just to say hello to passers-by. And that's something I'm going to play it back just to kind of, for people who might have forgotten, he said something like that. He basically feels like an outsider, and I think a lot of Western white people, especially people who don't believe in God, feel
wanted
that.
the sense that you always need to prove yourself. You always need to sort of offer the world something in order for it to love you back. The fear of not being enough has behind the scenes driven an awful lot of what I've done, and I think it's very common for a lot of people. The fear of abandonment, sense of always sort of being on the outside. It's like irrational fear.
I mean, so what do you think about that? So I'm trying to,
He's scared
like,
of his girlfriend leaving him.
say again?
He's scared of his girlfriend leaving him.
Yeah, and everybody else and everything else. That's true. Okay, cool. So yeah. That is a very real and important feeling. And I think, again, I'll bring it back to atheism, because people who stay in marriage, religious people stay in marriages not because the other person is so good looking and they're perfect, because we know, we think human beings are incredibly imperfect, right? We do it for the sake of God. Like, God expects you to do this and you should do this, and it's the right thing to do because God says it's the right thing to do, and blah blah blah. And you could give more reasons, like the right thing to do is actually for your benefit as well. God doesn't just make random rules. But yeah, I think that's another effect of atheism, that relationships are transient. It's like, why should you stick with that person? Like, if you only live once, might as well dump one person for the next person, for the next person, etc., etc. What do you think? Is that an effect of atheism, that relationships are transient?
Yes, because, you're probably more certain of your wife staying with you than you are of your girlfriend staying with you, because, the girlfriend hasn't committed to you yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And most people aren't married anyway. So
And I don't think he's married, because he's talked about that recently, I think. Yeah. Which is
you think he might be gay?
No. I think some people end up feeling they're gay because they're like, there's something wrong. How comes I can't connect with anybody? So some people have that effect after a while of failing at getting into a relationship. I think that's what I think, but I could be wrong, no, from what I get, he is very, like, these podcasters. I don't know if you noticed, Joe Rogan, whatever. People tend to interview people they agree with, and the people he interviews are kind of Christian-leaning traditionalists. So he's definitely not gay. He's not a gay. The gay thing is not his thing, I don't think. Yeah. So no. Anyway, so let's just assume he's heterosexual, and I think he is trying to get into relationships. But he talks about how difficult it is to chat up a woman. By the way, he talks about, like, he considered it the most excruciating feeling. So I think if we were to develop this thing about another problem with being an atheist, when you are an atheist, then you don't have an automatic community called religion, and most religions have matchmaking departments. Would you say that? Is that right? That's what I think. That's my experience as an Ahmadi Muslim. We're very organized Muslims. There's some level of matchmaking and all that kind of stuff. So that could be another thing that make you feel like alienated and not connected, and nobody's helping you. There's no community. Like, what do you think about that?
Well, I know if you go to your local mosque and you're single, I guess some busybody will try to set you up with somebody else who they think is a possibility. Isn't that what usually happens?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say for every mosque, but that's the impression I get. People get hitched, and there is the very quite relatively easily. There's always the what we call the aunties who are very quick to, try to match you up. I think women particularly are good at that in societies, and especially Muslim societies where they consider it a must to get married. So yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of drive to make it happen, which is good. A good default. Yeah, it's a necessary thing to do. It's good that it's a default. Yeah. So I would say yeah, even though I don't go to other mosques but you can see clearly loads of people getting married all the time, and it's very important. And something's happening. There's some sort of system there. Yeah, but I'm an Ahmadi Muslim. We're very organized internationally. Like for example, I've got married to somebody in Ghana, and what I did was I've never been to Ghana, and I got the phone number of a mosque, and the imam said, "Yeah, come over, we'll sort you out." That kind of thing. So there's a matchmaker there and stuff like that. So I can speak for Ahmadi Muslims at least that there is definitely a system. Who knows how good it is, but it worked for me this time, so that was good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. The other thing I want to delve into, so we talked about all sorts of things like loneliness, nobody, keep treating each other as brothers and sisters. There's no community. There's no reason to stick with each other. Another thing which is really interesting in this person's sake, in this person's case, is that he's incredibly successful. He still feels crap. And you would imagine that being so successful amongst the top podcasters, at least as a Brit, you would start feeling comfortable. But that hasn't worked for him. And he still feels that he needs to continuously prove himself. I want to see if I can find that. Oh, yeah. Maybe just from here.
Unsuccessful.
Yeah, let me rewind it a bit more.
I guess not being enough. I don't know who for.
Sorry. He said besides not being successful. But even enough. Like, okay. Like, at what point do you how can you feel more enough unless you're successful? Actually, you explain to me. What do you think? Like, how can you... Because I know the answer. Actually, I'm going to talk about a verse of the Quran that I forgot to even put there. I'll put that.
You're jumping around all over the place.
Yeah. So, okay. So let me ask you a question while I'm getting that verse of the Quran. How can you feel successful, be successful like he is, and still not feel enough? What would be your whatever you want to say about that?
Well, we know from his career that he appeared in the first series of the reality show Love Island, which is, just this trashy show for, good-looking, stupid young people who become part of the entertainment. And I guess he knows he's going to lose his looks one of these days soon. And then it won't be so much fun for him, maybe.
But he's got a successful podcasting thing, which has nothing to do with looks. It's to do with intelligence. He's brought up.
Don't you think he's sort of being promoted because of his looks? He goes to the gym, he began a career in nightclub promotion. It's all this sort of hedonist, youth culture sort of crap that, and he knows his.
Have you listened to his podcast? Because it really doesn't seem to be about anything to do with looks. You have all sorts of, you got people like, I don't know, the usual Jordan Peterson. People don't like him because of his looks, I don't think. And he's got all sorts of random people. People listen to his material, I think. Yeah, but although
But
what
you
you're
know,
saying,
he started in this sort of crap, right? You know,
so
he
you
was in a
think,
dating game show, Take Me Out, Love
sure,
Island, and
yeah. I mean,
I
he
think he's
did
promoted
say,
because of his looks.
he
Right?
did
They
say,
always choose
go on.
somebody good looking, you know, to appeal to the ladies, and then he'll can be tortured and, you know, insecure. And, you know, he talks
Yeah.
to a whole stable of these, you know, Steven Pinker, you know, Sam Harris, Douglas Murray, you know, Islamophobe.
Yeah.
You know, all these, you know, as you say, trad people known for their Islamophobia. So, you know, that's him. He's promoted because of his looks, you know, so that, you know, young men want to admire him, and then he, you know, he goes all insecure, probably gay, obsessed by the cult of youth and beauty.
Okay, but he did say, I don't know if it's true, but this is what he said, and I don't think you'd lie on YouTube. He said he only had 2,000 subscribers from being on, you know, when he started, through his being recognized as being on Love Island. So I don't think it had that much effect, and I don't think is he that good looking that people just, you know, subscribe to him because of his looks? I didn't think. I mean, what's your
I think,
opinion? Do you think
I mean, you
is he
know,
good looking?
well, I would consider him to be, I guess, a Chad. I mean, they're not going to let some, you know, bald guy, you know, say all these things, because then people will say, we don't care, you're an ugly git, so, you know, get out of here. You're supposed to suffer.
I
Because, you know,
mean,
that's how they think, and that's how they treat each other.
okay, do you know Alain de Botton? If I'm saying his name right, he's pretty bold and very, very popular.
Yes, he's
Alain,
a
still alive?
Trustafarian, yeah.
Atheist,
As far
whatever.
as I
I mean,
know, yeah.
yeah. So I mean, he's bold and
Jewish.
people listen to him.
Yeah, but he promotes atheism basically. So
Okay.
he you know his school of life series is, you know, that kind of, you know, he's very good at talking and giving
Hmm.
lectures and, you know, being sympathetic, but he is
Hmm.
promoting you know, why don't you just leave your, you know, marriage if they're upsetting you too much, kind of thing. That's
Hmm.
what these liberals, you know, move on up, move on, you know, do it before you know, dump before you are dumped, you know, that kind of shallow thinking. And, you know,
Hmm.
no wonder they get depressed.
Yeah, that would be depressing because if you treat people like that, then you expect to be treated that way back. Or at least like attracts like, I would say. So if you're the kind of person who thinks that way, you probably be interested in people unwittingly or subconsciously to those kind of people, like those kind of values and attitudes. Okay, I put this is my idea of, well, there's a couple of verses. There's this one, you can read it, it's very poetical, but it's essentially saying like the reason to explain the idea of why Williamson, despite you know, achieving some high level of success, still feels that he's never enough, and because he's chasing an illusion. So the Quran talks about disbelievers, their actions while they're disbelievers, they're not chasing the only one fulfilling thing, that is God. That's the only really meaningful thing, and you can say that in a logical way because everything falls apart and everything will disappear. So what's the point of like having loads of money and then it will just, you know, you'll be dead and you won't be able to take it with you anywhere. So
Mhm,
it's it's built into human beings that anything besides God, and this is my claim, and we can kind of talk about it if you want, if it's true, but anything besides God does not fulfill. And we kind of see that in society all the time. You got celebrities getting everything, yet you're really, really insecure. Look at Tom Cruise. I think he's a good example. I don't know. That's how I feel. So yeah, so he's been chasing stuff and it's an illusion. That's why the Quran calls it a mirage. People who don't know what a mirage is, it's like something that looks like water and then you chase it, and then you think it's going to quench your thirst, and by the time you arrive at it, it's disappeared. The illusion disappeared, because the illusion is only always at a distance. And that's the kind of nature of Western success. It's always like chasing, but when you finally get it, it feels empty and pointless. I didn't post the whole verse of the Quran, which describes basically this is sort of self-punishment and of achieving your goals and realizing it's empty, essentially. So that's one thing. What do you think about that? So let me ask you a specific question. Do you think most forms of success in the West are empty, and that's why even supposedly successful people are still depressed? Is
Yes,
that
because I think fundamentally they think these forms of success are important, but then they are ephemeral, and then they despair at the idea of losing their looks, their youth, their money, their and I guess for wealthy, successful people, they think people only like me because I'm successful, and when I'm not, I will be shunned. And they dread that day, and maybe it eats them up.
Sure. So you've got the fear of losing it all, but also there's the feeling that every time you achieve something, it's never enough. Would you agree
Well,
with
as they
that?
say, you're only as good as your last achievement, right? You may have been maybe your record went to number one, but you could be a one-hit wonder, right? You're only as good as the last success you had.
Yeah, and also there's this thing about homeostasis. It's like you can't be constantly at this heightened feeling of, oh, I've achieved something. Once you've achieved it, your body goes, that becomes your norm. Like, okay, you're number one. You've got number one, whatever song or something, right? Then it's like, okay, I got the number one. You got used to it. Like you might be like dreaming about it for years and years, but when you finally achieve it, it's like, okay, I got it. I mean, do you agree that that's what happens to human beings? I'm sure that's some sort of psychological phenomenon that, like, you just get used to whatever you've got, and it doesn't
Yeah.
really feel successful anymore.
Well, yes. So they either worry about losing what they already have, or feel. I mean, keeping up with the Joneses, and all kinds of things that might, make them anxious. If it's
Yeah.
not money, it's status. It's about who you know, and that kind of thing. So
Okay, let me put it to you this way. You know, Michael Phelps, do you know got the most gold medals in swimming or anything, I think? I don't know what. Do you know the guy? Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you
I
heard
never
of him?
heard of him, but sportsmen are quite boring, aren't
Okay,
they? And
sure,
very
sure,
shallow.
exactly.
But
So he's famously really depressed, right? And he's got like the most gold medals ever, right? So nobody's ever going to take that away from him, that he's got like millions of gold medals, right? So it's not a case of losing it. I think it's a case of, well, it can be that as well. Sorry, I agree with that. Is some, I don't know. But there's also the emptiness of those things, those achievements. Like, okay, you swam really fast. Like, seriously, what's the meaning of that? Like, outside the Olympics, it'd just be considered crazy, right? Just swimming really fast. Do you get it? So there's an emptiness of almost pointlessness to some extent of these achievements. And so loads of, I think, like people like Paul Gascoigne, there are loads of famous footballers, especially, who get really depressed after they retire, because I think it's because kicking a leather ball, filled with air or something in a net one side or the other side, isn't deeply meaningful, and so they kind of realize that afterwards, and then it's quite depressing, and it's like, what did I achieve? Just kicked the ball really well. Do you think there's an emptiness? I think, okay, let me ask you two questions. Do you think there's an emptiness in most of these goals? Not physical, not scoring goals. I mean these aims. Do you think there's an emptiness
I
in
think
most Western
you're
names?
getting around to saying that the only enduring success is successful relationships with people who are dear to us, such as, you know, family, spouse, children.
I wasn't going to say that, but I think that's just, that is important. But even those things can fall apart, right? Like even if, you know, like let's say Gaza, they die, right? You know, they get killed or something. There's so many things that are out of your control. I think it's so a lot of these people somehow get through that because of this belief in God again. They'll meet them again, they'll meet their family again, and it depends on how hard you try, and you're not in control of things. So something goes wrong, you're not depending on things being under your control. Anyway, that's what I think. What was I going to
Well, I
ask
suppose
you?
if,
Go
you
on, go on.
know, that you have to a degree, submit yourself to, you know, whatever happens to you with good grace, without, you know, blaming people, which I think a lot of people, you know, want to do. You know, I'm not successful because you're not the best spouse I could have. You know, you're a lousy kid because you're not as, you know, successful as I would like you to be. I wish my parents had been richer, or, you know, cooler, or whatever. So people just look around for someone to blame and destroy their relationships in the process, or get themselves into trouble by scapegoating people, for example.
Scapegoating and grass is greener on the other side. It sounded like what you're talking about as well. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So Prophet Muhammad said, like, the best way to not be ungrateful is to look at people with less than them. So that's a good mechanism to overcome that, I guess. What do you think about this? That even if people are so confused nowadays that even if they're successful in one way, they feel like they need to be successful in very, very opposite ways, possibly, and even contradictory ways. So essentially, like, they're so confused, pulled in different ways, and essentially, the reason why I pointed out this verse of the Quran on the screen is that where we have many masters. Essentially, we're like slaves to many goals, like, oh, I must get this many views, but at the same time, sometimes getting more views is a very empty thing compared to actually having a good conversation. So you've got all these contradictory goals that are pulling us apart, and so you might feel successful in one way, and then there'll be all these other metrics that are telling you you're not successful. So do you think that's another Western problem, that they're pulled, they don't have one idea of success? Like for me as a Muslim, everything can go wrong in my life, but if I think I did the right thing by God, like God expected me to do this and I did it, I'm good. Like everything can go wrong. Like I'm not really saying I want everybody to die and all this kind of stuff, but that's kind of the general idea. I've got one master, one mind, as it were, right? But most people are pulled in different ways, not one mind, but like they're a fractured mind. What do you think about that? Do you think that could be a reason for his depression? It's pulled in many different ways. There's no one form of success. Any success he achieves, he's failing at a million other forms of success.
I think so. It's sort of like, well, we know we've all done multiple choice tests, and there's usually only A to D. But imagine if you have multiple choice tests that go from A to Z. So by the time you've finished your paper, you feel you failed. You feel that, you know, in all probability, because of the abundance of choices that you could have taken, you're pretty much certain you took the wrong choice and went down the wrong road, and therefore, you know, failed
So
to
even if you became
make the correct decision.
successful, so say you chose option A and you become really successful at option A, but there was also option Z. Do you think that makes people depressed? That even the, like, it kind of is a bit weird, isn't it? Like, that you can be really hyper successful and then still look at the things you're not successful at? What do you
Well,
think about that?
I think a lot of people want the feeling of it was always meant to be. I was always meant to marry her or him. I was always meant to, I don't know, go to whatever or do whatever job. You know, some occupations are called vocations, which means that you are, you know, led irresistibly to becoming a soldier or a nurse or, you know, a politician or whatever, because you couldn't help it. It was calling to you and you had to answer the call, that kind of thing. So if you feel that, you know, whatever it was meant to be, then you accept all the suffering that might have entailed, you know, making that choice. And this gives you a certain kind of peace, I believe.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
I would agree. Yeah, that makes sense, because there's a path, you're on the right path, and any suffering is not even that much suffering, because you're kind of enjoying the fact that you know that that trial is not a random, just a trial, but it's a training. Do you get what I'm saying? It's not just a pure, like, kind of like just an examination hall. It's a process. You're becoming better out of it. Do you see the difference between? So do you get what I'm saying? That it's not just wrong or right. It's a process where you become a beautiful, better person through the trials. They're not empty, random trials. They're training.
Yes. Yeah. So if you believe in God, then suffering is either punishment for sin or a trial for you to prove yourself, as in the trial of Job.
Yeah, the trial of Job's, where he lost everything, isn't it? And yet he was still grateful and still believed in God, because that was essentially the only thing that mattered to him. Is that I understood that right?
Yes, because the idea was that Job didn't do anything wrong, but his friends were saying, you must have done something wrong for you to suffer so terribly. And he said, I don't really. But anyway, in the end, he didn't curse God and die as his wife told him to. He refrained from doing that, and then he was restored. And that's the story of Job.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people think, well, because I mean, the story was, God and the devil were having a chat, and the devil said, "Yes, Job is thanking you because he's got such a wonderful life, but he won't if he doesn't get any, if he had a terrible life." And God said, "Want to bet?" And won the bet.
I mean, I don't believe. I mean, I believe in the Bible, but thinks that it's been corrupted. Taya, who's listening, he's a Christian, won't be happy about that comment. But I think a lot of there are some very good takeaways anyway to be had. Like, if you truly believe in God and God is your only slave to God, then whenever you lose everything else, you're not concerned too much. Yeah.
I mean, the Bible, the New Testament, I believe. I think it's the New Testament that said you can only serve one master. I think it was Jesus who said that. I'm not sure, but this echoes the verse that you put in, because you know, obviously, if different people are telling you to do opposite things, then you're going to be conflicted. And then, if they're both important people, like wife number one wants you to do this and wife number two wants you to do the other, and you don't want to displease them, and you randomly make a choice, and then you think, oh, I've done the wrong thing. It's that sort of idea, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I mean, the idea is that if you only have one boss, then it's easier to understand what you have to do for the best.
Absolutely. Yes, exactly. You won't be, I like to describe it as stressed, because stress is when you're pulled in different directions, and that's naturally what's going to happen in life. You're going to have psychological stress from being pulled in different directions all the time. I feel like I want to wind up, and I like winding up. Okay, what are your last thoughts? I was going to play the video again, but I like to be finishing on time. So we know what the video says. He feels successful. He feels empty. He feels somehow hating himself. What do you think is going on in summary, Claire?
I think because he is part of the cult of youth and beauty, he feels that time is passing by and moving on, and it's only a matter of time before he loses his looks. And if he's gay, as I suspect, then gay men are even more cruelly treated than straight men. I believe. I may be wrong about that.
Interesting. But I'm beginning to kind of agree with some of the things. I don't think he's gay yet. I mean, I think he might end up gay if he doesn't find somebody, but I do think that he talks about like even those successful people start saying he got lucky and stuff like that. So there is a lot of potential for online hate. And in our individualistic society, and individualism essentially makes you competitive. Deep down, you're competitive, and everybody doesn't really like you, and everybody would like your position, your success, and stuff like that. So I can imagine that could be a thing, and I can imagine that he cares about his looks. I care about my looks as well, but I try not to. But we're all kind of subject to all sorts of weaknesses and stuff. But like, what helps me through all my many weaknesses is like my focus on God. Like, okay, if I go bald, it was not the end of the world. Do you know what I mean? I'm still like, the God is my main thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I always try to make it clear I'm far from kind of, I don't even want to say the word perfect, without my faults. I've got millions of faults, millions of psychological things I'm dealing with, but the fact that God is center as much as I can to my life, everything else kind of doesn't matter. So like, people, you've probably seen me on you speakers corner, people insulting me all the time, right? And people even telling me I should be
You take
dead.
it so well.
Yeah, I laugh, right? Because I'm not the center of the universe. I'm not doing this because I need views. Clearly, Claire, that I could probably get a lot more views than the 20 views that I normally get if I kind of done like really nasty. I could talk to certain people and get loads more views. You know what I mean? Like have aggressive, nasty conversations. But it's not important to me, so yeah, I think not being in the center of the world, if I was going to summarize it, really helps. And this guy, poor guy, I do like him. He does have a lot of good material, but I think his one thing is that because he's an atheist, it's not like a clear certainty where you're going, and you do need that certainty. And I'm going to put one thing, I'm going to be greedy, Claire. Jordan Peterson, I think, suffers from being unclear that he doesn't believe in God, or does believe
Yes,
in God.
he won't even say whether he believes in God or not.
Exactly. So you're in the same boat in some ways. So that's what I think. It's dangerous
No,
to be.
I always say, why doesn't he just say he's agnostic? Then people will stop speculating, right? Because I mean, it's a kind of yes and no answer, annoying though it is. But I really believe that even people who think they know only believe that they know, because obviously nobody knows for certain.
You don't know for sure, but like there are, as I said, different levels of experience of God. Anyway, as always, really value all your your opinions, you being here. And I appreciate everybody in the chat as well as always. Thank you so much, Claire. I just have to add that every time in the past, I've had many friends that I couldn't really get onto live streams. It's very difficult to be brave enough to express your opinion. So I do say it all the time, but I really appreciate you being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you for asking me.
You're welcome. All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you for listening in. Bye. Hopefully it was useful.
Okay, bye.